For those of
And
you
we
who
are
are
back.
standing, this gentleman over here told me he has
I
a
tried
couple
to
of
get
chairs
several
that are folded up against the wall if you want to take one. He said he'll trade it for a new boat or a new paddle. Other than that, I think he was joking. You might just find yourself a chair. All right.
Okay, welcome back. We are going to be doing course description. The video attempt has failed, so we are falling back on this as our only option to record the safari seminar. So welcome back to course description 2020 safari seminar.
If you do any sport or any activity long enough, you end up with a hero, I'm sure. I've got a couple in the water safari, and Tom Goins, who I worked for back in the day, won the race 7 times, and was the race chairman from the mid-70s until the 80s. Jerry Cochran, who was here earlier, is one of them. I think that's just because he's that much older than I am. But he's one of those. But if you go back to safari history, these two guys are probably like my ultimate safari superheroes. This is Jay and Harold Bloodworth, who, help me, Bob, if I say it wrong, in 1966 were the only team to finish the water safari out of all of the entrants. Now that was actually one of the longest water safaris, went all the way to Freeport. But I got the honor of meeting these guys for the first time in about 1989, and they were such true gentlemen. And to tell you how deep this race gets into your bones, I went to Harold's funeral about 10 years ago, and it wasn't a typical funeral with the casket and everything. At the funeral were all of the press clippings from the 2 water safaris that they had won, to tell you how deep it gets into your bones. So without much further ado, we're going to get into, but anyway, I found this picture from the Houston Chronicle, and it's like, you know, if I ever get a tattoo, maybe I'll get Jay and Harold on. Except for at my age, if I got a tattoo, they would get wrinkled in no time. I did it wrong. Course description. Can y'all see that?
Not well.
Kind of. That's okay. My description's kind of, anyway. Everybody have their notes from their handouts up here? Raise your hand if you didn't listen and don't have a handout.
And is that on the website for anybody watching?
On the website, there's some corrections to be made on the website, but they're not material corrections. So, Texas Water Safari has historically started at Spring Lake, at Aquarina Springs. Remember they call it Aquarina Springs anymore? At the Palmetto Center, which is now owned by Texas State University. So sadly, some of the really cool things about it are gone. There is no swimming pig named Growl. They do still have the glass bottom boats. The tramway is gone. And a few years ago, they took the subway out. And I haven't seen a Mermaid One in all the years I've been doing the water safari. So, Spring Lake is staples. Man, it really is just not.
Yeah. Should we try turning the lights off? Should we try... What other options are we got? Not a ton. No. I just think the glare.
Or turn the brightness
Sit up against the windows.
Maybe go look at the brightness and see if you can figure out, maybe,
You could turn the brightness up on the projector of your computer.
Yeah,
see
like
what-
I know how to do that.
Okay.
You're the teacher. Come
Yeah.
on. Go help.
Libby said,
Go home and do it and put it on YouTube.
all right, you're going to have to suffer through it, or somebody can go stand against the window. Okay, so the race starts at Spring Lake. Okay? The important thing about starting at Spring Lake is you can't practice in Spring Lake. It's a sensitive area. It has some endangered species in it. We have been very fortunate that they continue to let us use it for the start. That being said, this would be a good time to mention the Clean Boat campaign. Before you get to the check-in, you need to have scrubbed your boat down according to the procedure that is listed on the website under, I think it's under race information. And part of that, we don't, you hear about these things, zebra mussel and all these things, they're spreading through the river system. We sure don't want that in Spring Lake. So, at the end of Spring Lake is Spring Lake Dam. I have to tell you, this has become a bigger thing than it used to be, in the sense of when there were 50 of us in the race, it wasn't that big a deal, 50 boats. With 170 boats, it's a big deal because there's about 3 distinct paths through it, and everybody thinks that they need to be the first person to the bottom of it. So just pick your poison, left, right, center. I think last year we had some specific routes you had to take because of some damage that the dam has received. So pay attention to that. Rio Vista Dam. Rio Vista was redone probably 10 years ago now, maybe. I'm at that point in my life where 10 years ago could have been 20 years ago, and everything that started 20 years ago is probably about 40 years ago. So take it with a grain of salt.
There's tons of videos on YouTube. Just punch in Rio Vista, Texas Water Safari, and you can see every way to get around that thing.
That's what Patty said. And some of them you don't want to use.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, the second drop, remember what I said about the length of an aluminum boat earlier? They're how long? Oh, y'all are good. 17 feet 4 inches. The second drop at Rio Vista is slightly less than 17 feet and 4 inches. Because if you can find it on YouTube, it's the most, well, it's 2 things. It's the most heartbreaking thing and the most amazing thing you would ever see. Aluminum boat gets away from the paddlers, floats down, and I kid you not, if there is this much boat stuck on both sides, I couldn't believe it. And it doesn't immediately wrap. So the whole river is being held up by this aluminum boat to the point where the San Marcos rescue folks finally had to rip it out with a fire truck. I mean,
A crane.
I wish that I had owned that particular aluminum boat before it got there because it was like something out of Flash
Yes,
Gordon or something.
Google boat stuck at Rio Vista,
like
Texas Waters,
2014
2014, and it's pretty humorous, yeah.
I had to go there.
Except for those guys. That wasn't fun.
Thompson's Island Dam, we talked about earlier today. You must portage, or you must paddle under the road bridge. How you go over the dam, either Cape's Dam at the top or the lower portion, is up to you. I wish you could see this. Blanco River confluence comes in about 4.5 miles down. Under most conditions, it's pretty obvious that you need to turn right. However, somebody always manages to go left. We had somebody paddle up all the way to nearly to where the Walmart is. And then they said, well, we screwed up. We paddled up to where the Walmart is. Can we just put our boat back in at an equivalent distance and go on from there? Do you know what the answer was?
No.
Because
You just got help, yeah.
you got help. And if they'd have paddled back down, it would have been bad on them. I don't think they would have made the cutoff at
Staples.
Cummins Dam. If y'all want, I'll show this to you during the break or whatever, just on my little computer here. Cummins Dam, you can portage it over the center.
Hi, Sandy.
Center right. You can go around to the left. And that's about it. I have to tell you, the folks on the left are not very appreciative, but you do have the right of portage under Texas law. Just don't hang around and have a camp out or something. About 5.5 miles, you get to Westfield Crossing. not a big deal, except you've got the Westfield Crossing. And then you come to probably the most exciting place for spectators on the race course. That's Cottonseed Rapid. Now, it's not nearly as exciting as it used to be. The last flood kind of straightened it out, and you just make a sweeping right-hand turn and just keep making your sweeping right-hand turn, and you're through it. I mean, it's got to be that simple, right? Except for it never quite works out that way.
Yeah, go ahead and video Cottonseed Rapids, Texas Water Safari, and there's some great YouTube videos.
Do you want to mention Old Mill right before that?
What's that?
You want to mention Old Mill right
Yeah,
before
Old Mill
that?
we don't have up there. Old Mill, what year was that? Used to be a pretty straightforward little kind of chute, and then at some point it was called Old Mill Rapids because there was an old mill there, and one of the floods just took that thing and broke that wall all to pieces, and it is as if God took all of those pieces of Old Mill Dam and everything and picked them up and they all came splashing down in the middle of the river. I make it up every time I go through there now. It changes with the water level, and it has been a boat-eating son of a gun. I have to tell you, as a guy who repairs boats, I love it. As the guy who paddles through it, it's not so much fun. It's chewing some boats up. But I will tell you this, you can stand up through most of it if you need to. Don't try to be a hero. Skulls Crossing, no big deal. It's just an old bridge you go under. Martindale Low Water Bridge. This one, right, go on Martindale Low Water Bridge. FM 1979, there's kind of some little rapids between there and Staples. If you need to get out at my house and hang out for a little bit, I'm cool with that. But basically, from 1979 to about halfway to Staples when you get to the lake, a lot of twisty little pieces that can chew you up, but there's some fun little rapids too. And you'll get to Staples Bridge, Staples Dam. There you can portage left or right, and there really is no center at normal water levels. The cutoff for getting to Staples is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. All this is printed in both the course description and the rules as far as cutoff.
And the checkpoint's on River Right.
The checkpoint is on River Right. So if this is one of the situations, if you're a team captain and you're going to meet your team on River Left, that's okay. But you have to remember to go to the other side of the bridge and sign your team first. Okay? Now the next section from Staples to Luling 90 is, in my estimation, probably the roughest section of the entire race course. Especially at the current water level. No, I'm starting to smell that pizza. I can see everybody getting at the current water level, if you're around long enough, somebody's going to say, oh, this is really low, and you're like, you don't know low, you little whippersnapper, 2009 was low, or 1984 was low. It's getting low enough where it's chewing up some stuff. The other thing that happens when it starts to get to this level is it gets pushy, and it's pushing you into things, all the crap seems to always end up right where all the current wants to go as well. So it's getting to be a little bit rougher situation. So if you said, Jay, I only have time to paddle one section of the entire river, my suggestion, and I'm sure there are people who would disagree with me, would be to paddle from Staples to Luling 90. If you can handle everything that's between Staples and Luling 90, in my estimation, you can probably handle everything the rest of the way. There's some little bridges through here. The Fentress Bridge is about 9 miles down from Staples. Prairie Lee, you see the Prairie Lee bridges they're really not practical any longer for using as handoff points. I suppose you could find a way to use Prairie League 1 because there's a campground there now and you can pay entrance fees or something, but as a practical matter, they're really difficult to use. And you see where it says Stairtown Bridge, that section from Stairtown to Luling 90 is a money maker if you're a boat repair guy right now. I've fixed the wings on several boats of late because of the stuff that's in there. And then you'll have somebody who tells you, oh, there's nothing in there. But the truth is, if there's enough stuff where I'm starting to fix boats, then there's probably some stuff in it. Okay. The cutoff time at Luling 90 is 8 p.m. Be sure to say hello to Chuck and Ellen Truesdale. They have been the checkpoint officials there for coming on 30 years. And they're the sweetest folks on the planet. I mean, other than my wife.
Good one, Jay.
Luling to Palmetto. This is a... He's so full of it. Did he really say that? My friend Tim Curry, who must be watching this on YouTube, is the reading glasses stealingest guy on the entire planet. I'm just saying. So from Luling 90 to Palmetto is a very underrated section. So if you have to ask me what is, I can find 2 sections. I would say from Luling 90 to Palmetto. I'm telling you, I've got teammates and guys. One of the guys I've done more safaris with, he was like, "Oh man, there's nothing between Luling Dam and Palmetto," and I call baloney because there's lots of little twisty things. This is Luling Dam. It's a pretty obvious portage on the right. It's marked. There's a pretty good trail if you don't want to go the slippery hard way, or you could just walk over here and look at it a little while. And there's a pretty quick way to go down the rocks, but it's pretty treacherous footing. And then probably 2/3 of the way, what do they call it on here? Broken Dam Rapid, or Son of Atim, which is what it usually gets referred to. It's an old rock dam. It is generally runnable, but I have to tell you, the rocks have shifted in it enough that you need to know where you're making your slot, because you'll go down the slot that you thought's been working for you since 1985, and there's a rock there, and you just come to a screeching halt. And we've had several people over the last few years that managed to damage their boats to a point where they couldn't continue the race. If in doubt, portage. You don't get bonus points for running these things. You don't get time taken off for running these things. It's just one of those. You need to.
There will be no photographers at Son of Atim.
There are no photographers at Son of Atim. Thank goodness, I usually pee there. And then the next check is Palmetto State Park. The cutoff to reach Palmetto State Park is 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. Now, this is one of those checkpoints that is basically you have an old low water bridge that spans the width of the river. And I would ask you to come up and look at some of these pictures
See if you can get in close.
that Patty so graciously sent to me last year, and realize there's 2 things that are at work here. Sometimes it's dry, like what's in this picture, that I'm sure you can all see so clearly, and people are standing up there, and the boat can slide under the bridge. Sometimes it's like this. There's the boat sliding under the bridge. What's that?
Stacy just started watching. I said, "Oh, look, it's Stacy Greer."
And then you have situations like this where there's water running over the bridge. And it's not safe. So you've got, if you're a spectator, please don't get down on the bridge, because there's going to come a point, probably getting to be about nightfall on Saturday, where there are a bunch of boats coming in here. And as far as places on the actual race course, this is probably the most dangerous single spot, because if you're standing up in front of that bridge and you get swept under it, never know what's under there. I mean, there have been boats that have gotten swept under it and come out fine. But it's just be careful, watch out for spectators, have a plan. The worst thing you can possibly do is come floating into something without a plan. What are we going to do, Jay? I don't know. What do you think we should do? And that is when your boat breaks, because you're completely out of control. Now, I will say this. There are two kinds of canoe racers. There are the canoe racers that have broken a boat, and there are the canoe racers who are going to break a boat. It's not an if thing, it's a when. From Palmetto to Gonzales is a pretty twisty little section. When you get to Slayton Cemetery Bridge, the river starts to slow down there, because that's where, depending on water levels, that's where you start to hit the backwater off of the Guadalupe River. And so it can be kind of miserable, especially once you get to 90A. You know, it's just kind of like this slog until you get to, unless you have a situation where the Guadalupe's low and the San Marcos high, and then you've got good flow, but you'll figure that out for yourselves after enough time. This is the last section, that section from Slayton to 90A is generally the last section for log jam. It's been relatively clear of late. There have been some monstrous jams in there through the years. Then you see, you'll get to the confluence of the Guadalupe. You make a left turn. This one people don't manage to screw up as much. And you're going to paddle on down to Gonzales Dam. I would say that when you get to, this is on your course description, when you get to close to Gonzales Dam, there's a sign hanging down and some floats on cables, and it says something to the effect of no activity within 300 feet. And it's like, then I always have the conversation. It's like, what the heck am I supposed to do if there's no activity? And my partners usually say, well, you haven't been doing anything this long. Why would you have any activity within 300 feet? So you can portage either right or you can portage left. It is generally accepted that right is faster. It is also generally accepted that left is safer. And I would tell you from what they tell me, that if you get in a big hurry going down the right side, you could slip and fall, and you could knock yourself out. And you could find yourself in an ambulance, not knowing what the hell's been going on. And then you find out that your partner was trying to kill you. But that's not really what happened. That's just what the stories are told at that point. So you need to watch what that is. There's kind of all leaves and old crap all over these things. The next section is probably the second most boring stretch of the entire Texas Water. Gonzales to Hoheim. Some of you may have done, there's an annual group that gets together and goes from San Marcos, from Gonzales to Hoheim on New Year's Day or thereabouts. Woohoo! It's night though. So it's fun in that regard. And if the water's low enough, there's some sweepers and stuff that could eat you. But as a general rule, it's just 36.5 miles of freaking vision. And it doesn't matter if you're in first place or if you're in 40th place. It's just not my idea of a good time. The cutoff for Gonzales is 4 o'clock on Sunday evening. And there's so little to tell you about down to the Hoheim that the cutoff for it is 7 o'clock on Monday morning. The next section, Hoheim to Cheapside. is so, it can't be as boring as going to the Hoheim because it's shorter. That being said, there's some sweepers in here. There's some random little rapids. About halfway, 12.5-ish miles, there's a pretty good rapid in a right-hand turn. That used to be the point where you knew you were halfway before Cuero Dam was broken out. And then, we don't have it listed on here, but somewhere in here, you're going to come and you're going to see at the end of the long straightaway is a radio tower. I'm here to tell you that radio tower is almost at the bridge. However, this is only the first of many times you will see the radio tower. It's not 15 minutes to go, it's more like, an hour and 15 minutes. You're not almost there. But at least you know you're heading in the right direction. Okay? The cutoff time at Cheapside is 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday. That's 25-ish miles from the last spot. Now this next section, Cheapside to Highway 236, I kind of like it. You're going to come up and you're going to come to a series of bridges. It used to be that you would come to Cuero Dam. However, Cuero Dam has had a series of failures going all the way back to the early 80s. It broke through, you could paddle through it. About 1993, they came back and they patched it up and you had to portage it. Now, I, for one, liked the portage. Because at some point you want to stand up. It is pretty miserable, just sitting there the whole time. If you don't believe me, drive from Martindale to Key West, and then Key West back to Martindale, stopping only for fuel. You want to stand up, and that takes like half the time the safari takes. And you get to go to Key West. So, there's a bonus in there somewhere, right? But you want to stand, but anyway, what happens, it broke through again. And now you don't even get to see Cuero Dam anymore. You're all going to just paddle around. You're going to see, it looks like some kind of industrial post-apocalyptic movie or something with these, those more big words than I've used in the last year. Industrial is not that big a word, but post-apocalyptic, that sounded pretty good. You're going to pass a bunch of old sheet pilings, and you're going to just stay to the outside, and there you go. And I wish you could see this picture. Next year, I guess I'm just going to have to bring some black paper or something over the window. Or a social paper, except I don't know how to say. So this is one of those sections of the river that has changed. I always refer to the race course as 265 miles. However, in this particular section, right above 236, the river has shortened itself by 1.5 miles. That's not such a bad thing. Unless you're the landowner that lost the side of the river. But there was a shortcut through here that in 1992 was just little bitty narrow thing. And remember, it has that water running through it. So there was water running through it. And we go through, except for now there's a waterfall coming down the other side. And I almost killed a 7-time winner of this Ferrari, but we got through it and we cut off 1.5 miles. And then in 2000, my friend Chris Paddock and I were paddling through there, and we thought it must be open, and we got halfway through, and guess what? We could see the river, but the water hadn't gotten high enough to paddle through it, so what did we have to do?
Go around and go back.
Who said portage?
Portage.
Okay, portage is not the right answer. Whoever, I heard somebody say it. That means we would have cheated. We would have cut across the loops that we weren't allowed to cut across. So we had to paddle back out and around. Okay? Highway 236, the cutoff is 7 p.m. on Monday, so you've had 12 hours to go approximately 16 miles. Wow. Okay. So the next section will commonly hear referred to as Cuero de Victoria. 236 to Victoria is probably more correct, accurate. In the simplest terms, there is not a lot to deal with from Highway 236 to River Haven, which is where the Texas River Marathon started. At River Haven, at the end of that long straightaway, is a pretty tight sweeper that goes off to the right. You'll learn about the sweeper at the Texas River Marathon if you haven't bothered to learn about it ahead of time, because there's going to be, it's a choke point, and there's debris in it. So you need to know that that's there. But then once you get past that sweeper until you get to the Thomaston Bridge, there is very little to deal with and where it goes. I'm missing a page or something.
Missing nursery?
Oh, there it is. Borough 236 Thomaston Bridge is about, I would call it 18 miles, a little less than that according to the official mileage. Between Thomaston and Nursery, so about a mile-ish past Thomaston is a little rapid that's no big deal. You kind of go out to the right and come back through. Not a big deal. But down from that is another one of those boat-eating sweepers. If you're a decent paddler, it's not that big a deal. If you're a so-so paddler, it's not that big a deal. If you're a bad paddler, it will turn into a big deal. You need to know this is coming up and have a plan, because basically you're coming along and the whole river just decides to shift to the right. And there's a pretty narrow chute in there. And in this narrow chute, it heads into a wall and comes back out of the wall and just and then past that, there are several small rapids. Again, none of these are really boat eaters; they're boat swampers. If that's such a word. And then you'll get to the world's longest right-hand turn, and you'll find yourself at Victoria City Park boat ramp. The cutoff at Victoria City Park boat ramp is 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. Now, remember, you can compare yourself. I told you on the website, it's all the past results that we have split for, going back to the early 80s. And I constantly go back and try to get these updated part of it. So my first water safari, I thought, how hard could this be? So I went and I got the winning times from the year before off of the website, and I wrote them down, and I gave them to my dad, who was our team captain. And I said, here you go, Dad. We'll be at these checkpoints at these times here. It didn't quite work out that way. I mean, we did get to Victoria at the time that we told them we would. It was 4 o'clock on Sunday after, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. However, it was 4 o'clock on Monday afternoon instead of Sunday afternoon that we got there. Let's see, Victoria to Swinging Bridge. From the Victoria boat ramp into Business 59, there are some minor sweepers, but as a general rule, they're not a big deal. From Business 59 to 175, there are a couple of sweepers that, if you're not paying attention, can send you for a swing. Okay? When you get to, and you have to understand, if I say Highway 59 and Loop 175, those things are interchangeable because they changed the name on them to at some point. And it's not that I can't learn a new trick, it's just that why would you change the name of something? So, now I told you that Gonzo to Hoheim was the second most boring stretch of river. you now get to enter the most boring stretch of river, in my opinion. It's also one of those things, if you look at it on a map, is very confusing. That first year we did the race, we looked at it and it looked like, it took us about an hour to get from Victoria to Business 59. It took us about an hour to get from Business 59 to 175, which is now 59. And we looked at that map and it's like, it should only take us that long to get to Swinging Bridge. About 3.5 hours later, we came pulling into Swinging Bridge. My cousin had already went and found the sheriff, and she was going to be looking for our bodies and everything else. It's an 18-mile stretch. Now, I found a way through the years to keep myself entertained, and I give credit to Grady Hicks for this. There are 105 turns in the river from Loop 175 until you get to Swinging Bridge. Y'all count them during the race. Come find me at the finish line and let me know if I was off or not. 105. It'll keep you occupied for about the 3 or 4 or 5 hours you're out there. Now, the cutoff when you get to Swinging Bridge is 8 o'clock on Tuesday evening. Now, if it's 8 o'clock on Tuesday evening, that means you have 12. You've got 17 hours left to get to Seadrift. One of the things I should have said earlier and I didn't about the cutoff times, do not use the cutoff times to plan your race. The cutoff times are there in case you have some kind of catastrophe and you can catch back up. You don't want to be pulling in to Swinging Bridge at 8 p.m. after you've been pulled into Victoria at this other, and you're using them as the barely getting there. These are, number one is to keep somebody from being stranded way upstream when there's no possible chance of them finishing on time, and the other is it gives some hope that you could still finish the race, but you don't want to use that as your race plan. So Swinging Bridge to the saltwater barrier is probably my favorite stretch of the Guadalupe River. It is such my favorite stretch that probably every Tuesday or every Thursday from the time that it's daylight savings hit until the week before the race, I'll go paddle this stretch of the river. Because this is the stretch of river that we pull the most rescues out of. Not because it's my favorite stretch, but because people, A, don't learn it, and B, there's a reason it's called Hallucination Alley. There are numerous little checkpoint things you can use to keep yourself aware of where you are. There's a railroad trestle that's a few miles down. I think it's about 7 miles. And then about 3 miles from there is a pipeline crossing that's got just a ton of pipes crossing it. And I tell you about every pipeline crossing on the river, except for you'd spend no time counting pipeline crossings. There's a bunch of them down there. And then below that is where the log jams typically start. There is a horseshoe in the river. Y'all come up and take a look at this slide later. There's a horseshoe in the river that basically makes such a turn that slows the water down and it catches all the logs. Now normally you think, oh, that sucks, I just have to carry around. But because the elevation is down there are myriad potential shortcuts down there. Now, there are also those kind of shortcuts that are kind of like a horror movie. In that you're driving through this fancy metropolis and somebody says, here, I'm going to take a shortcut, and you end up in the bad-sided part of town and all the zombies attack you. That's kind of what happens back there to people, apparently, is they get back in there and the zombies attack them, or whatever attacks them, and they get lost. So, if you don't know your way through the shortcut, don't do it. Stay with the main river channel, even if it means, more poor portages. Because if you get back in there, I meant to put a track on. I have just tons of GPS tracks from back in through there. And my friend Chris and I had gone back in there. Mind you, every Tuesday or every Thursday from daylight savings to the race gets here, we go down. It's kind of, so we can become one with the mosquito. And all of a sudden, we've done this. I had no many times I've been back. We're like, where the heck are we? And a jam had formed, pushing water off into a spot, and we found ourselves back in what's called Alligator Lake and ran out of water. I mean, it wasn't like we didn't know where we were on the planet because there's power lines and stuff, but we had to carry the boat back trying to figure out how the heck we did this, So know where you're going. The time to learn it is not the week before the race. The time to learn it is not from what somebody else posted on the internet. And if you've gone down to learn it and you're stupid enough to post it on the internet, you deserve for your competition to kick your ass. Because there's no such thing as a fair fight. You don't give that kind of information away. You go down there and learn it. Don't trust somebody else's markings. And figure out where you're at and what you're doing. This is an adventure. Somebody's going to ask me later, what's the best GPS to use? And my answer is the one that's between your freaking ears. Because that doesn't run out of batteries. You need to know where you're going. These areas down here are so tight that the error on a GPS is enough to put you in the wrong spot. We're not launching missiles down Saddam Hussein's chimney or something. Although that'd be kind of fun if that was what you did. But you need to know where you're at. I mean, I can think, probably no more horror stories about people. My favorite, you can read it somewhere, I think it'll probably be involved in the book too, is the Naked Man story. There were teams that got down there, and whatever mileage they had when they were supposed to take on their GPS, they got to that mileage and they weren't to the next checkpoint yet. So they turned around and started going back upstream. People do weird things, but, I guess that wasn't the Naked Man story. That was some guy just went out of his head.
That was at the saltwater pit.
No, it was
Yeah, Colin Jewell was that passed back upstream.
Oh, bridge.
Swing
Bridge. They got scared.
The river
Freaked out.
We got to paddle back up to the start.
Yeah, the river ended.
Don't count on your GPS. I mean, I'm not saying not to use it as a tool, but don't use it to know where you're at. I guess I'm getting to be an old Luddite or something. I'm going to go back to Martindale where I live here this afternoon. Did somebody say I said a bad word?
No. They're just putting mosquito emojis up.
I'm going to paddle. I'm not going to paddle back to Martindale. I'm going to drive back to Martindale. You know what I'm going to do out of habit? I'm going to open my phone and I'm going to put home on Google Maps. Like I don't know how the heck to get back to Martindale, right? It hasn't moved in 100 years. But we do that. We get so conditioned to this. And you asked about needing a battery backup earlier. Man, if I just ran my batteries out on my GPS and I don't know where I'm at, bad on you. And guess what? The river, water all goes to the same place. It goes to Seadrift, right? Well, not exactly. So saltwater barrier. The cutoff is 6 a.m. Wednesday. Now you are definitely find yourself there at 6 a.m. on Sunday or Wednesday. You're definitely in a bind because you have about 16 miles to go. You've already been traveling at about, the speed of slow. And you've got to get across the bay. You've got 7 hours to do all this in. Now, the good news is, down to Tivoli or Highway 35, there are no obstacles as a once you've gotten past the barrier. I'm running late, Holly. There's no obstacles. Generally, all the way down to the bay are no obstacles, except for the water hyacinth has gotten so bad the last few years that it started creating floating mats that you can't paddle through. And this last year, virtually everybody had to go out what is called trailer cut. For those of you who are taking notes, that's TRAYLOR cut. And come in higher into the bay. And so you need to get down there, and you need to know that too, because, if you've got to come through trailer cut, it's not quite, everything's not as it seems. It's not a big, smooth, just extra stuff. You find yourself back in some little spoil islands and that sort of thing that are no fun to deal with.
There's Alligator Lake.
There's Alligator Lake. Y'all come look at this in a bit. So, as a general rule, mouth of the bay is Seadrift, main paddle to Foster's Point, paddle to the southern point, take a left, see the pier, get out at the flagpole, right? How hard could it be? And I'm here to tell you there have been years where it was not hard at all. Then you have to put a story cover on the boat. I'm also here to tell you that you can spend about 17 hours out there too, right here? Because it's enough to pick your boat up and slam you over. Have a plan. Did Libby have a long time out there?
She had a long day, yes.
It was 8 hours.
8 hours in the bay in her C1.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I walked it and then swam across the canal.
You paddled on the same side. Which would be the way I would probably try to do it. So you need to know where you're going. It's really confusing out there at night, sort of. Most of the lights, you know where to go. Seadrift is over here. It's probably more confusing to someone of my generation of racers because the only light you used to be able to see was the 6 lights at Bayfront Park. The problem is they keep putting up more lights. And so in 2017, these young men have drugged me all the way from the start to, we've come around the point, and there they are, 6 lights. And I start driving the boat towards them. And they're like, we had you with us to drive the boat. Where the heck are you going? I said, and it's like, no, the finish line's over here. Because all of those lights are so confusing. And the flashing amber light of the finish line is sometimes not enough to see. So that pavilion's a good site. Something to pay attention to. And I will say that when you get to the finish line, it's an oddly emotional experience. It's like somehow for me, it's both. The first time is I did it. Then after that, I can still do it. But the truth of the matter is the race isn't that much fun. The truth of the matter is, over the last 40 years, most of my friends are these people that I've done this race with. And that's some of these guys that have been racing since before I started, and some that finished last year who came to hang out at my house there in Martinsville. It really is a life-changing experience. Maybe for good, maybe for bad, maybe we'll never know. But all that to say, Pizza's been over here making my mouth water, and I'd be happy to answer any course questions during the break. After that, we're going to talk a little bit about different supplies you need. Holly just walked in. She's going to talk about things that first-timers need to know. She has successfully coached quite a few of the novice winners from the last probably 10 years, maybe longer than that. No, that's all right. And then, for those of you, Holly here, Caitlin Minor, said that for the first time, and Virginia Condi will be here, and they're going to talk a little bit specifically about things that ladies have to deal with, and then they're going to talk a little bit about, just general prep. I'm not sure how they split that up. And we'll talk about gear, and then we'll have kind of a question and answer time. So in the meantime, enjoy your lunch. Drinks are in the kitchen. Kristen's going to bark if you got something.
No, I was just saying there's water and soft drinks in the refrigerator.
That's what drinks in the kitchen means, isn't it?
Where they were, and I think there's maybe still some coffee in there.
And Girl Scout cookies.
And Girl Scouts.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to close out this second segment of the course description and break for lunch. Please join us back at 1 o'clock when we'll be live streaming again.